In 1964, when President Johnson stampeded Congress into the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, there were only 2 no votes in either house. And I interviewed, again, I'm bragging, I interviewed Senator Wayne Morse. The other, as you know, was Ernest Greening. They set a standard. They set a standard for courage. When President Bush used 9/11 to stampede Congress into war more recently, only 1 member of either house rose to that standard of courage. And she's with us tonight, Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
Well, Bill, first of all, thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for leading today's programs. Also, most importantly, where is Phil? Phil, thank you for staying the course. Thank you for continuing working for peace and justice. I'm so happy to see you. Thank you. Give Phil a round of applause. And to my good friend Tom, Senator Hayden, who I served with, I had the privilege to serve with in the California legislature. I just want to thank you and this very prestigious organizing committee for inviting me to be with you this evening for this really, truly amazing celebration and commemoration and conference. It's an honor and a privilege to stand here today with so many heroes and sheroes of the peace movement. I just have to take a moment to say something to you. So many of you have touched my life personally and helped shape my vision for a peaceful world when I was a student at Mills College, a student at the University of California at Berkeley, as a staffer to our great statesman, Congressman Ronald Dellums. I mean, all of you. And now as an advisor to me as a member of Congress. So I salute you, I honor you, and thank you so much, so much. Each of you has an amazing legacy and could rightfully be given your own weekend of celebration. From organizing workers to fighting for peace and demanding action from a government that had truly forgotten its people, you have all helped bend the arc of history just a little closer toward justice. And what a time to come together with you to lift up the power of protest. What a defining moment this is to have this conference this weekend. I would also be remiss if I didn't thank and reflect upon the leaders of this movement who are no longer with us, including our own drum major for justice, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King. In reflecting on this weekend's event, I kept returning to one line from Dr. King's letter from the Birmingham jail, written on April 16, 1963. Dr. King wrote, he said, "True peace is merely not the absence of tension," he said, "it is the presence of justice." Today, as we continue our fight for peace, those words are as true now as they were in 1963, and we are still demanding justice. We are still demanding justice. Of course, just 40 miles away, we see our brothers and sisters seeking justice. The people of Baltimore are standing up and speaking out against injustice in their community. Thank God. They're speaking out economic injustice, social injustice, injustice of opportunity, and injustice before the law. And so while I am so glad to see the wheels of justice begin to turn, Baltimore is not the only place calling for an end to injustice in a new age of peace. It's happening in Ferguson, Cleveland, Staten Island, in Oakland, California, my home, and throughout the country. Throughout the country, these young people, they picked up the mantle. But far too often, these cries for fairness and justice have gone unheard. Their faces, who we see on television and who we're with each and every day, reflect the reality of America. Beautiful faces of all races, all ages, all backgrounds. Faces of people who are coming together to work for justice and an end to violence. People from the African American community, LGBT community, AAPI community, Latinos, progressives, liberals, recent immigrants, women, young and old, all of them committed to justice. Together, they are standing and marching arm in arm, hand in hand, to realize the true peace that Dr. King envisioned. A peace that preserves and uplifts their communities, a peace that empowers the most vulnerable, a peace that means opportunity for all and a new era of hope. In their fight for peace, they have come together to form a true and empowered coalition. Something that I am proud to say was pioneered really and field tested in the district I represent, the East Bay, which includes Oakland and Berkeley, California. Now, many have said that the East Bay is the cradle of the peace movement, and still today, the East Bay continues to lead the way on many fronts. The East Bay is where the movement ran one of the most pro-peace candidates for Congress against the pro-war establishment. In 1966, a relatively unknown reporter and economist named Robert Scheer. He boldly, remember Bob? Bob boldly challenged the incumbent Congressman Jeffrey Cohelan as one of the first anti-Vietnam War candidates. Meanwhile, another movement seeking justice and peace was growing in Southern California and across the Southwest. It was the Chicano Civil Rights Movement. It was, remember, the Chicano Civil Rights Movement. Boldly demanding an end to discrimination and for opportunity for Mexican Americans and all Latinos. Now, one of the movement's leaders was a young man from Arizona named Raul Grijalva. Raul. And today, and I talked with him earlier, my colleague, Congressman Raul Grijalva, he serves as the co-chair of our Congressional Progressive Caucus, which is the largest congressional caucus in Congress, the Progressive Caucus, thanks to you. And Congressman Grijalva is a leading voice in Congress for justice, voter empowerment, and comprehensive immigration reform. Now, these movements around the nation were so important in awakening our nation's consciousness about inequality and the lack of fairness that's still endemic in America. Now, at the time of the anti-war movement, one of the great injustices and transgressions, of course, was the war in Vietnam. It was a poison polluting our nation while robbing opportunities from the most vulnerable. As Dr. King said in his Beyond Vietnam speech on April 4th, 1967 in New York, if America's soul becomes totally poisoned, he said, part of the autopsy must read Vietnam. Vietnam. While Bob Scheer's campaign was unsuccessful, it captured 45% of the vote, 45% of the vote. And it showed that the community's strong opposition to a war that was waging 8,000 miles away. Bob's campaign, which was 4 years earlier, laid the foundation for my friend and mentor and my former boss, Congressman Ron Dellums, to run, who'll be with us tomorrow. Bob's campaign laid the foundation for Ron to run on an anti-war platform in 1970 and win the Democratic primary. Ron is really the father of coalition politics. His campaign was based on what we're seeing now around the country, based on a multiracial, women's equality, labor, progressive, anti-war coalition which brought people together for real systemic change. That election led to Ron's nearly 30 years of tireless advocacy for structural change and for reordering our national priorities. That election led Ron to work to end apartheid in South Africa. He carried the South Africa sanctions bill. I think he introduced it over 11 times until the Congress finally overrode Ronald Reagan's veto, put the United States on the right side of history. He fought to prevent dangerous nuclear expansion and increasing the awareness about atrocities of the Vietnam War. Congressman Dellums carried the East Bay's commitment to global and domestic peace and security. He carried this into the halls of Congress, and eventually as chair of the powerful House Armed Services Committee. That's what Ron did. He took our vision into Congress. He created a legacy of unwavering commitment to the ideals of not only the East Bay, but the entire anti-war movement. Now in 1998, upon Ron's retirement, I was honored and humbled to be elected to represent this great progressive and diverse district. So while the last 17 years have been very interesting, but they've passed quickly and very busy, we fought some hard battles, you and I. I remain privileged to have the honor to represent this amazing district and people, but I have to tell you, one of the darkest days during my time in Congress was in 2001, following the horrific and terrible attacks of September 11th. In those days, our community and our nation's commitment to finding an alternative to war was tested on the House floor. In those dark days of confusion, anger, and mourning, an unsettling rush to war began. Now, despite opposition from various members of Congress, a 60-word blank check for endless war was laid before Congress. And I must take a moment to thank Marcus Raskin. I got to thank Ron for their wise counsel. Remember, Marcus, during that time? Their objective analysis and their unwavering friendship for me personally was what helped me get through that period. It really was. And Mark, I'll always remember you for that. Thank you. Because Marcus knows, like many members, I was torn. You know, some form of action was clearly needed, but was Congress ceding too much power to the president? In the quiet and calm of the National Cathedral, Reverend Nathan Baxter's sermon spoke to me. He told us, he said, despite our grief, we should not let our actions become the enemy that we deplore. That's what he said. At that moment, I knew what was the right vote. I knew that I must oppose this blank check for endless war and believed that my constituents, while uncertain and anxious, would ultimately understand my vote. Now today we are living with the ramifications of that 2001 blank check. Over the past 14 years, it's been used more than 30 times. Now this is what the Congressional Research Service has said, which is public information, so you know it's more. 30 times to justify military action, indefinite detention, warrantless wiretaps, and drone strikes that kill innocent civilians by raining fire from the sky, often to the detriment of our national security. We remain right now in a state of perpetual war. And so it's past time to repeal this blank check for endless war. It's past time to do that. It's past time. Way past time. Congress has a constitutional responsibility to give the American people a voice in matters of war and peace. We must also reevaluate our strategy of bomb first, ask questions later. It undermines our national security and costs us billions of dollars, trillions of dollars. And the same is true in 1967 when Dr. King spoke against the war in Vietnam and outlined how it led to what we unfortunately are seeing now throughout the country today, austerity and draconian cuts to vital lifeline programs. Dr. King said, he said, there was a real promise of hope for the poor, both black and white, through the poverty program. Then came the buildup in Vietnam, and I watched the program broken and eviscerated as if it were some idle political plaything of a society gone mad on war. Dr. King called this divestment of funds for the poor a demonic, destructive suction tube, and he described this war as an enemy of the poor. Think rather what those dollars could buy here at home. As a member of the House Appropriations Committee, and I'm also on the Budget Committee, I know that billions could be invested in our communities to feed the hungry, shelter the homeless, and to end poverty and create good-paying jobs. I know that, you know that. We know that these billions could assist and empower our veterans who have given so much. We know that these billions of dollars that are spent on drone attacks could be used to educate the next generation of young people. It's past time now to understand the depth and breadth of the lessons of the movement. So while tonight we're honoring the magnificent elders in the fight against Vietnam, the Vietnam War, and leaders of the peace movement, I hope you continue to encourage and inspire our young people to pick up the baton and carry on our great fight for peace and justice. We are witnessing now the power of protest. This is 50 years after Selma. It's 50 years after the escalation of the Vietnam War. But we still have a lot of work before us. We must repeal this blank check for endless war and step off of our perpetual war footing. We've got to do that. That's basic. That's basic. That's basic. We must bring accountability and restraint to the Pentagon's bloated budget. We must give peace and diplomacy the opportunity to succeed. Got to do that. We must demand that Congress live up to its constitutional responsibility to debate and vote on whether or not to go to war. We've got to do that. That's immediate. We need to do that next week. During the movement against the war in Vietnam, you raised your voices and the nation listened. Today, your nation needs your leadership again. You spoke truth to power, and it was ultimately successful. So we must empower the next generation to do the same, to speak out against inequality and racism, to speak out for a stop to endless war, to march for liberty and justice for all, not just for some, to burn up the congressional phone lines and keep up the street heat in our great struggle here, and to register to vote, to actually vote, and to hold elected officials accountable. Because without justice, there is no peace. So thank you again for staying the course. Thank you for daring to demonstrate through your bold work that yes, peace is truly patriotic. Thank you again.